happens to the human consciousness after death? Well, according to studies, it moves on after death. One of the biggest questions modern day science seeks to answer about human consciousness has to do with its origin, whether it's simply a product of the brain or if the brain itself is a receiver of consciousness. If consciousness is not a product of the brain, it would mean that our physical bodies are not necessary for its continuation, that awareness can exist outside of our bodies. Asking these questions is fundamental to understanding the true nature of our reality, and with quantum physics gaining more popularity, questions regarding consciousness and its relationship to human physicality become increasingly relevant. Max Planck, the theoretical physicist credited with originating quantum theory, a feat that won him the Physics Nobel Prize in 1918, offers perhaps the best explanation for why understanding consciousness is so essential. He says, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness, end quote. Eugene Wigner, also a theoretical physicist and mathematician, stated that it's not possible to, quote, formulate the laws of quantum mechanics in a full, consistent way without reference to consciousness, end quote. Now, does consciousness move on after our death? In 2010, one of the most respected scientists in the world, Robert Lanza, published a book titled Biocentrism: How Life and Consciousness Are the Keys to Understanding the True Nature of the Universe. An expert in regenerative medicine and the scientific director of Advanced Cell Technology Company, Lanza is also very interested in quantum mechanics and astrophysics, an interest that led him on the path to developing his theory of biocentrism, a theory that life and consciousness are fundamental to understanding the nature of reality, and that consciousness comes prior to the creation of the material universe. Isn't that something? His theory implies that our consciousness does not die with us, but rather moves on, and this suggests that consciousness is not a product of the brain, it's something else entirely, and modern science is only now beginning to understand what that might be. This theory is best illustrated by the quantum double-slit experiment. It's a great example that documents how factors associated with consciousness and our physical material world are connected in some way that the observer creates the reality. Okay? The observer creates the reality. This is actually scientifically proven, and it's really bizarre. Physicists are being forced to admit that the universe could be a mental construction, or at the very least that consciousness plays a fundamental role in the creation of matter. R.C. Henry, professor of physics and astronomy at Johns Hopkins University, wrote in 2005 publication of the journal Nature, according to pioneer physicist Sir James Jeans, the stream of knowledge is heading towards a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. Mind no longer appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We ought rather hail it as a creator and governor of the realm of matter. The universe is immaterial, mental and spiritual. Live and enjoy. This is from The Mental Universe, Nature, 436-29-205, 2005. Lanza's theory implies that if the body generates consciousness, then consciousness dies when the body dies. But if the body receives consciousness in the same way that a cable box receives satellite signals, then of course consciousness does not end at the death of the physical vehicle. This is an example that's commonly used to describe the enigma of consciousness. The double slit experiment has shown repeatedly that observations do not only disturb what has to be measured, they produce it. So it's the observer that produces matter. They said we compel the electron to assume a definite position. We ourselves produce the results of measurement. The idea that we could be living in a holographic type of universe is not so far-fetched, and if the observer is required for physical matter to manifest, then the observer must exist before the physical body. The hypothesis that the brain creates consciousness dominates the mainstream materialistic world of science, despite the wealth of evidence showing that the brain, and our entire physical reality for that matter, could be a product of consciousness. And this is a great quote here, illustrating what is meant by the material science. The modern scientific worldview is predominantly predicated on assumptions that are closely associated with classical physics. Materialism, the idea that matter is the only reality, is one of these assumptions. The related assumption is reductionism, the notion that complex things can be understood by reducing them into the interactions of their parts, or to simpler or more fundamental things such as tiny material particles. This is from Manifesto for a Post-Materialist Science. So examining the neurochemical processes in the brain that occur when one is having a subjective experience is important and does offer certain insights. It tells us that when this type of experience happens, that is going on in the brain. But it is not proved that the neurochemical processes are producing the experience. What if the experience itself is producing the neurochemical processes? Determining how consciousness causes matter to materialize is our next step. And one thing is for certain, however, with all of the information out there postulating the existence of consciousness as independent from the brain, it's time to push the boundaries of our current accepted framework of knowledge and question what we think we know. The implications of this theory are immense. Just imagine if life after death were confirmed by the mainstream scientific community. How much would this impact not only our understanding of science, but also philosophy, religion, and many other areas of our lives? A great lecture. There's a video here, Dr. Gary Schwartz, a professor of University of Arizona, discussing whether consciousness is a product of the brain or the receiver of it. It's a little overview of the subject that is full of peer-reviewed scientific research that not many people have time to go through, and it would actually be almost impossible to go through all of it. Some materialistically inclined scientists and philosophers refuse to acknowledge these phenomena because they are not consistent with their exclusive conception of the world. Rejection of post-materialism investigation of nature or refusal to publish strong science findings supporting a post-materialistic framework are antithetical to the true spirit of scientific inquiry, which is that empirical data must always be adequately dealt with. Data which do not fit favored theories and beliefs cannot be dismissed a priori. Such dismissal is the realm of ideology and not science. This is from Dr. Gary Schwartz, professor of psychology, medicine, neurology, psychiatry, and surgery at the University of Arizona. So what about near-death experiences? Below is a video of Dr. Bruce Grayson here speaking at a conference that was held by the United Nations. He's considered to be one of the fathers of near-death studies and is a professor emeritus of psychiatry and neurobehavior science, University of Virginia. In the video, he describes documented cases of individuals who were clinically dead, showing no brain activity, but observing everything that was happening to them on the medical table below at the same time. He describes how there have been many instances of this, where individuals are able to describe things that should have been impossible to describe. Another significant statement by Dr. Grayson posits that this type of study has been discouraged due to our tendency to view science as completely materialistic. Seeing is believing, so to speak, in the scientific community. It's unfortunate that just because we can't explain something through materialistic means, it must be instantly discredited, he said. The simple fact that consciousness itself is a non-physical thing is troubling for some scientists to comprehend, and as a result of it being non-material, they believe it cannot be studied by science. Near-death experiences, or NDEs, have been documented and studied for a long time. For example, in 2001, International Medical Journal The Lancet published a 13-year study on near-death experiences, NDEs, and they said, our results show that medical factors cannot account for the occurrence of NDE. All patients had a cardiac arrest and were clinically dead with unconsciousness resulting from insufficient blood supply to the brain. In those circumstances, the EEG, the measure of brain electrical activity, becomes flat, and if CPR is not started within 5 to 10 minutes, irreparable damage is done to the brain and the patient will die. Researchers monitored a total of 344 patients, and an astounding 18% of them had some sort of memory from when they were dead or unconscious when they had no brain activity, and 12%, that is 1 out of every 8, had a very strong and deep experience. Keep in mind that these experiences have occurred when there is no electrical activity in the brain following cardiac arrest. Another study comes out of the University of Southampton in the UK, where scientists found evidence that awareness can continue for at least several minutes after death. In a scientific world, this was thought to be impossible. It's the world's largest near-death experience study ever published, and it was published in the journal Resuscitation. In 2008, they said, a large-scale study involving 2,060 patients from 15 hospitals in UK, United States, Australia, launched, and the Awareness During Resuscitation study, sponsored by the University of Southampton in the UK, examined the broad range of mental experiences in relation to death, and researchers also tested the validity of conscious experiences using objective markers for the first time in a large study to determine whether claims of awareness compatible with out-of-body experiences correspond with real or hallucinatory events. Concluding comments. Nikola Tesla said it best. He said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it would make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." There's a reason why every year internationally recognized scientists continue to push this commonly overlooked topic into the mainstream scientific community. The fact is, matter, that is protons, electrons, photons, anything that has a mass, is not the only reality. If we wish to understand the nature of our reality, we cannot keep examining physical reality while ignoring the fact that the unseen makes up most of it. Perhaps the most imperative question is, what is the role of non-physical system, such as consciousness, in relation to a physical system, matter? Despite the unrivaled empirical success of quantum theory, the very suggestion that it may be literally true as a description of nature is still greeted with cynicism, incomprehension, and even anger. This is from T. Folger, Quantum Smantium, Discover, 2001. This is what's known as post-materialist science, and in my opinion, it's clearly the next area of study to further understand the nature of our universe, and the study of consciousness is right at its heart. I'll leave you with one question discussed between Dr. Grayson, mentioned earlier, and the chief scientist of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Dr. Dean Radin. This is from Arjun Walia Collective Evolution on Bended Reality. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.